You've felt it before. That quiet voice, that subtle pull, that knowing without explanation. And yet, you didn't follow it. Because right behind it came something louder, faster, more urgent: fear. And now you're left wondering, what was that? Was it intuition or was it fear? And how do you tell the difference when both feel real? My name is Justin Gates. Joining me today, as always, is my co-host with the most, Michael Perry.
Hey, fam.
And you're listening to the New Asheville Podcast. Hello and welcome to the New Asheville Podcast. We're so happy you joined us for this episode. Today, Michael, we're going to be talking about intuition versus fear.
It's an important topic. You know, I remember when I first started down this path and I started uncovering my crap, all my insecurities were bubbling up. And I was dealing and juggling with so much in the moment. And it started becoming like, how do I know what is intuition? How do I know what's fear? Or what's fear?
Right.
It was always something that I struggled so much with in the beginning because, man, when that fear gets going, it's loud. It is in your face.
Yeah, it is. And intuition is not random. It's not guesswork. It's connection to a greater intelligence. I want everyone to think of it so you can kind of follow my perception on this. Think of it like a universal subconscious mind, a field that knows beyond logic and beyond analysis and beyond these time-bound reasonings. And in our teachings, this is something we call the force. Sometimes I do refer to it as a universal subconscious mind or intelligence, right? Or the light. We refer to it a lot, like we call it the light a lot. But I want you to kind of think of it as like this field of coherence that communicates through subtlety and clarity and presence. But here's the problem. Most people cannot hear it or feel it or see it clearly, right? Not because it is absent from us or missing in our lives, but because our internal worlds are filled with noise, like we talked about in the last episode, or they're filled with conditioning, right? And a lot of fear-based programming. And when this happens, something gets distorted, doesn't it? We start to confuse anxiety for intuition, or fear for guidance, or urgency for truth. And without realizing it, we start to begin to move away from alignment instead of toward alignment.
You know, I think one of the things that's so interesting is this is one of those paradoxes within itself. Because intuition loves to make us step into the unknown, to step out of our comfort zone, which is immediately what triggers our anxiety, our insecurity, our fear. And so it's this beautiful yet crazy and confusing dance we go through where our intuition is like, hey, take the risk, make the move. And our bodies are like, I'm not ready for this. I might get rejected. I might fail. And so then our fear levels up and we end up pushing intuition away because we don't like what it has to say about what we have to do to course correct or to make a meaningful change in our lives.
Mm-hmm. So intuition is quiet, fear is loud. Can you take us through that? Why does it seem like fear is so much louder than intuition?
Fear has one goal, and that is to protect ourselves. And when we go through anything, when intuition is asking us to expand, it's like that friend saying, hey, come on, let's do this. And fear is like that aggressive parent that's like, you messed up, don't you dare do that. And it's so much more in your face because it knows the only way to keep you safe is to keep you in that familiar area, to restrict you, to do what you've always done because you're still alive because of that.
Right. Yeah. And you bring up a very, very important point here that we need to kind of distinguish here right off the bat. There is a distinction between conditioned fear and natural fear, because not all fear is the same, right? Natural fear is protective, as you said. It comes in response to something that's real, something that's actually happening, immediate, and it pushes us to act, right, in an act of defense. and then it passes. Then it goes. Once the grizzly bear is out of the way, then we're not scared of bears anymore again until we see another one, right? But conditioned fear is different, is it not? That's the fear that we learn, and it's built through our past experiences and all this emotional conditioning and these repeated narratives that shape how we interpret what's happening, right? It doesn't actually respond to what's present. It responds to what's been stored, right? So that's a very good distinction that you've made, and because we need to lay it out right now. We're not talking about all fear. We're talking about that fear that really, really seeks to dominate us, right?
Yeah, it's almost primal.
Yeah.
And it's because the patterns you have been through, the situations that you have gone through, especially when you were young, the things that kept you safe then are the same things your fear tries to dictate now to maintain that equilibrium.
Yeah. And this is why I say intuition is quiet and fear is loud, because intuition does not argue with you, does it? It does not panic. It does not rush you. It's not urgent. It simply presents itself as like this calm, knowing thing that just kind of subtly pushes us in a direction, right? And it never forces its way forward. It's quiet, but it's clear. And this conditioned fear moves much differently, as you said. It's reactive, it's urgent, it demands, it shoves. It doesn't just push you, it shoves you into action. And it creates all this pressure that feels like it needs to be resolved right now, whether it's real or not, right? Whether there's real danger or not. It doesn't give you space, right?
No. I mean, you can almost look at it as like fear, it feels protective,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of the reasons it's so easy to confuse with intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're in that mode, what it's telling you feels logical.
Yes. And there's an axiom that piggybacks off what you said just now. It confuses us, right? Axiom of light. Confusion distorts reason. When in doubt, do not act. Seek guidance and proceed cautiously. And this is where that distinction becomes practical, right? This is where we can start to use this advice. Fear does not just create urgency. It creates confusion, as you said. It rips your attention away from you and it takes you into different directions, all different kinds of directions, right? Fills our mind with noise and scenarios. And again, it pushes us and pressures us to act before we're actually clear about what's actually happening. And when that happens, our reasoning becomes distorted, right? We're no longer seeing what is true. We're reacting to what feels immediate or urgent. But intuition doesn't operate that way. Again, it doesn't overwhelm you with options. It just says, here's the path, right? Intuition seeks to make you whole again and then move you in a certain direction, right?
Yeah. I mean, I will say, again, the simplest path is often the hardest walked. It talks
Mm-hmm.
about in the Bible how the bridge is thin and narrow. When it comes to intuition, it wants you to not only trust it, but it's trusting yourself to make the right decision and accept truth. You know, I can think of a couple situations where I was trapped in a work environment, a relationship, and my intuition was always like, hey, you spent enough time here. It was never boisterous, it was never trying to force me, but it was always tapping me on my shoulder saying, hey, you know, it might be time to move on.
Yeah.
But then the fear would kick in. Nope, I need to hold on to this. I'm safe here. I know this.
Right.
I can just grow here. What would you say some of the most common patterns you see of people mistaking fear for intuition?
Well, first off, I think a lot of people confuse fear with caution. Let's start there. Caution is not fear. It is. I mean, one could argue that caution is fear, but it's fear that comes from intelligence and not from chaos. So, not walking out in front of cars, not touching hot things, not jumping off a cliff without a parachute or something. That's caution. That's not fear. And I think most times we confuse fear with conditioning, and that's kind of where this bad fear comes from, right? Is from the conditioning for our whole lives, and maybe even our lives before this. An argument could be made for that, right? But the patterns that we see the most affect us in the most obvious ways: our relationships, we can't function at work. We can't function outside in society because we're always hyper vigilant. We're always constantly looking for all the bad guys when the truth is there aren't as many bad guys as there are good guys out there. But these patterns are easy to see within us. Maybe not for us to see, but for other people to see outside of us ourselves. And this is why the pause matters so much. It's why we talk about the pause so much, right? Because when you feel that pressure and you feel that urgency, that rush of internal noise and this dissonance, it just doesn't make any damn sense. The answer is not to move faster, right? It's to become still, to step back so that you can see these patterns that I'm talking about, to step back and to allow what is unsettled in you to settle, right? Because clarity doesn't come from force, it comes from alignment. And when you give yourself that space, something begins to separate, right? The noise falls away, the urgency softens, and what remains is something more clear. And taking us back to intuition, that's where intuition is found. Not in the rush, but in the stillness that follows the rush.
Yeah, intuition gets drowned out so easy once you're activated like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, like you said, the pause. I mean, there's a reason we bring it up almost every episode.
Right. It's good. It's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so necessary because we gotta learn to be observers of our minds, observers of our bodies, and not just take everything our mind or body tells us as fact and face value.
Yeah. You hear a sneeze and a coughing today, it's because allergies are bad out here in Colorado right now.
Tis the season.
Please forgive our coughings and our sneezing. We're really trying not to do them, but it happens. Why is the agreement of patience so important here, as in regards to intuition versus fear?
Yeah, I mean, patience is vital because that axiom you gave is in my top 3 favorite axioms. It got me through so many hard times because when I was going through grief, I was going through all these crazy emotions. The only time I knew I had clarity is when I allowed myself to be calm in the storm. And getting calm in the storm is not a matter of flipping a switch. It is mindful body regulation. It is mindfulness. It is breath work. It is meditation. It is doing everything you can to pull yourself out of that fear, out of that storm, and bring yourself back to baseline.
Yeah. And patience is what allows all of that to happen, right? Patience creates the space and helps us sit with the stillness, because it's hard to sit with stillness. Going back to what I said about intuition, it's not that intuition isn't there for us or that you have to be born with it or something. It's just, it's hard for us to sit in stillness long enough to feel it or to see it, right? So patience is very important here because it allows us to recognize at the end of the day, Michael, it allows us to recognize which one we're experiencing in any moment. Is it intuition or fear, right? So what does fear do for us psychologically? I would imagine it starts to activate us, right? In some fight or flight or things like that.
Yeah. I mean, when you go from being an observer to an active participant in the storm, it takes full control. We have survival instincts for a reason. And we're going to do an episode about this next episode. But survival instincts were originally to help keep us safe, help us find food and shelter, help us find water. It was about expansion. Now we have most things readily available. And so it then turns internally. And now our survival instincts are keeping us away from criticism. It's keeping us away from hard conversations. It's feeling attacked anytime anyone has constructive feedback. And it's being able to understand that what's being activated in you it's monkey brain. What's it called? The reptile mind.
Right.
Our amygdala swells up, and all of a sudden our frontal cortex turns off. Amygdala controls emotions, and this is where our logical thinking is. Logical thinking goes out the window, and our emotions take the driver's seat. And so when we get into this state, it narrows our perception. It, again, like you said, urgency. We feel a need to solve the problem we are faced with as soon as possible, by any means possible, usually by the same behaviors we've done before. That's a great sign to know you're not acting from intuition, is when you're going into the same type of coping mechanisms. Are you someone who gets angry when you feel like your boundaries are violated? Are you someone who tries to please other people when you're feeling activated? Be mindful of what your mechanisms are that drive your survival behavior.
Hmm. Yeah, and this is why intuition feels very aligned naturally, and fear creates a conflicted, fragmented self, right? Because again, intuition is simple, it's direct. It may elude many of us simply because we don't know how to sit still long enough and listen to it.
It's like how many people live in an activated state.
Hmm.
Intuition can only really have much of a voice when you're regulated, when you're
Absolutely.
calm, when you're at peace.
Right. That doesn't mean sitting like in meditation pose all day long. Like in your waking day, in your waking state, in your regular days, your day-to-day present moment regulated. You can get there, right? You can get there. And that's where intuition finds you. Because again, it's very simple. It's very direct. Even if it's pointing to actions, right, that are difficult or going to be difficult, but the knowing, you just know, the knowing is clear, right? Your attention is not fragmented. You're not pulled in 1,000 different directions. It lands and it stays. But fear creates something very different. Again, we've talked about this confusion, overthinking, scenarios, and you won't even have just one scenario that you're worried about. You'll start having several scenarios and they're competing against each other, right? That keeps us moving toward something that's not resolution. Because we analyze, we second guess, and we go through these different possibilities without arriving anywhere at all, let alone anywhere stable. So when
I
your
mean,
mind is racing, go ahead.
just part of the survival instinct within us is to plan for the worst case scenario. And
Right,
so our mind's going to give us all the worst case scenarios.
right, right. Up to and including, being eaten by a dinosaur or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it will. So when your mind is racing and you feel pulled in these multiple different directions and unable to settle on a clear path, clearly you're not in intuition, you're in fear. And again, that's where, you want to do the pause. The axiom that ties into this segment is once a truth is learned, it cannot be unlearned. Always allow the truth to guide your way. This is where the difference between the two become unmistakable. You said it a minute ago, where we have to learn to start separating them and seeing them, right, and calling them out. Because I still deal with conditioned fear, right? You do too. It's in here until this body dies. I'm going to be suffering with it, and on some level, right? But the thing here is to understand that intuition carries a sense of truth. It doesn't need to be repeated, doesn't need to be defended or reworked or messed with. It settles and it becomes something we recognize even if we hesitate to act on it, which many of us do. We don't act on our intuition enough because we're not. Because I think somewhere inside of us, Michael, we're just still stuck in this loop of confusion between the two.
One question for you is it's like when people are activated, because I guarantee people listening know exactly what we're talking about. When we get
Hmm.
activated and we're trying to calm down, we take that pause. What is a question or reflection we can have to help sort of bring us back or decide if the direction we're being pulled towards is intuition or just fear trying to make us move in a direction?
Intuition comes from a higher place, far above us. You can decide if that's your higher self. You can decide if that's God. You can decide if that's universe intelligence. You can decide whatever it wants. Arguments can be made about what it actually is, right? But I don't think there's an argument to be made about where it comes from and what it does. So intuition comes from that higher place. That higher place is always looking out for us. It's always making sure that we are following a better path. Even if it's a harder path, it's a better path. Fear does not do that. Conditioned fear doesn't do that for sure. Caution is there to keep us alive. Conditioned fear is masquerading as caution. Maybe I should have said this earlier. Because it takes over. So the question you should ask yourself, who is in charge here? Me or fear? Me or something else, anything. It could be anything else that's shaping you and moving you around, right? that only has its best interests in mind. We talk about the ego on many shows, where the ego, it starts off as being something that's good for us, but once it takes over, then it starts this idea of it wants to preserve itself above preserving us. So you have to ask, you have to stop and say, who's in charge? This is what I do. When I get triggered into something, internally I stop for a second and I go, hold on, where's this coming from? Who's in charge? Because if it's not me in charge of me, then we got a problem, right? We got a problem.
No, that's the perfect answer to that, because, and I hadn't even thought about it like that, but fear always has such a dire need to get things done as quickly as possible.
I just want to share something about fear that we teach at Ashla, and it's very on point for what we're talking about. The nature of fear is quite simple to understand. It is dangerous, slippery, and cunning, and it lurks within the shadows like a scavenger waiting to feed on the mind, the heart, and the soul. Fear has many consorts with human nature, yet it is no friend or ally to any universal or cosmic power. The confused, conflicted, and misled who claim responsibility for the philosophical and spiritual wellness and betterment of others through fear-based and conflicted ideologies and spiritual paths, a lot of religions today, will say otherwise. If one thinks that it is fear that renders aid or comfort from time to time while one walks the road of life, he or she is mistaken. One must not confuse fear with caution. For every obstruction or challenge fear seems to help one avoid or navigate, ever so subtly, it erodes one's confidence and perseverance as it corrupts one's logic and reason. That's the kind of fear we're talking about today. The slippery, the cunning, the one that only exists to feed itself. Do not confuse it with caution, right? So fear keeps moving without resolution. It just keeps us moving in motion. Doesn't mean we're actually doing anything, right? Because it pulls us into these bad cycles and these all the stuff we've been talking about today, and it tries to force false certainty, right?
It's so deceptive. The more we talk about this, the more I'm just envisioning this. It's like you were saying, how it's so obvious, even though sometimes we can't see it. Fear is so insidious the way it can truly convince you that you are it.
Mm-hmm.
I think of Eckhart Tolle's whole concept of the pain body, how the ego and the pain body's number one goal is to make us identify with it, to make us believe we are it. And that is exactly what fear does. That's why it spins all the stories. That's why it latches on to similar experiences, because it's like, you need to realize you're going to get hurt, and then you internalize, I'm going to get hurt if I do this.
Yeah. This is why truth is so important. Truth is what gives intuition its clarity. It does not need to be built or forced. It is recognized, right? Truth is recognized. We don't create truth. It is recognized. When intuition is present, there's a sense of alignment with what is true. Even if the action it calls again is something difficult or requires us to strain or stress a little bit. And it doesn't need to be comfortable, but it certainly needs to be real. And fear, just the kind of fear we're talking about today, it just distorts that. It pulls us away from truth, right? Because it introduces doubt and confusion. And again, these competing narratives, right?
One thing I really took into consideration when I was going over these notes is how important truth is to intuition. And it's like, if there's someone who feels like, I don't feel like my intuition talks to me much, how much do you shy away from hard truths, whether it's hard truths about yourself or hard truths from others' perceptions? I really think that truth is so necessary, because if we can't see things for what they are, for ourselves, for who we are, then we're never going to be able to understand what intuition is going to try to tell us, because it'll just come across as decoded or a foreign language.
Yeah. So intuition creates clarity, but fear creates anxiety. What does anxiety do to our system?
Anxiety, it creates cognitive overload. I was talking earlier about how our amygdala fires up and takes over our mind. When it starts being fully activated and we start letting the fear cause us to spiral, we get tunnel vision. Every other possibility goes to the wayside. The minute we become identified with that fear, change is no longer a part of the picture. our nervous systems are flared out, our survival systems are activated, whether that's to run, fight, freeze, fawn, whatever it is. When we get overly stuck in that state, we get stuck looping. It leads to indecision. It leads to the inability to act or do things differently unless we pause and take the time to bring ourselves out of it. But the more we feed it, the stronger it becomes, and it happens rapidly.
Yeah. Intuition is connection versus being conditioned. You don't condition intuition. It is just simply connection. The intelligence of this universe communicates through coherence, alignment, right? It doesn't speak through fragmentation. It doesn't speak through inner conflict, right? When you're aligned, your awareness will settle and your clarity begins to emerge. That is the sense of order, a quiet understanding that does not need to, again, be forced. If you're connected, if you're consciously connected, I should say, through stillness, through regulation, that's when you're gonna be best aligned with your intuition. And again, we talked about the distinction between caution and fear. So the kind of fear we're talking about from here on out is just that conditioned fear, that fear that we have been right taught with, or taught to have. But fear is dangerous here. This kind of fear is dangerous because it just becomes automatic, right? It reacts based on what we have learned to expect, whether it's true or not, whether it's real or illusionary. And the anxiety comes from fear about the future. Stress comes from about the fear from the past. And then it just kind of sandwiches us in between and really wreaks havoc on our system, doesn't it? So fear reacts to what has been or what is imagined. Intuition responds to what is, simply what is. The axiom I chose to share with this segment is, if you realize that all things change, then there is nothing for you to cling to. That is what begins to loosen the hold that fear has on us, because this conditioned fear survives through attachment, doesn't it?
Very much so. That's hilarious. That's exactly what's in my notes too, to go over this. Because when it comes down to it, it's so much easier for us to fall in line with the systems we already know. Fear responds to patterns. That is how it tries to make us operate. If someone's yelling at me, I need to shut down. Or if someone's yelling at me, I need to lash out. There is a script that we have learned to follow throughout our entire lives that has been honed and refined to the most efficient possible, depending on the things we have gone through in life. And there are so many different things about this experience that end up becoming wounds that we run from. I think of attachment wounds. You got people who are anxiously attached, and so they cling on the minute they feel like their partner is pulling away. Or vice versa, you have avoidant people. The minute someone gets close, they push them away. They're not mindful of this pattern. They don't think of it like that unless they're aware enough. Instead, they listen to that fear of, oh, someone's getting close, I'm going to lose myself, I need to create separation, or this person's starting to be distant, I need to cling on so they don't leave me.
Mm-hmm. And that's where the wisdom of this axiom comes into play, doesn't it? Because when you begin to understand that all things can change, something starts to shift within us. Because we're no longer bound by what we have experienced before. Your experiences were real, but you don't have to let them dictate present and future things, right? So you're no longer bound by these things. You're no longer required to carry those patterns forward, because they don't have to be permanent. They will be until you change them, but they don't have to be that. The past is no longer something to cling to, in other words. It just simply becomes something that you experienced and moved through. This is another place where intuition becomes accessible to us, because it doesn't come from what we're holding on to. Simply, it comes from our connection, right? And here's a big difference. Fear clings to things. Intuition just allows things. Does that make sense?
Dive into it more. I think I'm following you, but for the listener.
Simply, fear tries to hold things in place, whether it's in the past or illusions of the future, right? Intuition meets us where we are right now. It meets the present, right? So when you start to let go of what no longer needs to be carried around, all that weight on your shoulder, you're just carrying this big bag of bullshit with you. When you set that down, you start to create space for something else to emerge. Fear breeds reaction, but intuition breeds guidance.
And again, it's like the more I've been thinking about this, the more I realize intuition often wants what's in the unknown, what's out of our comfort zone.
Hmm.
And again, it's not trying to push you out over the ledge, but it will be saying, hey, take the risk, give this a shot.
It's an invitation.
There we go. Perfect
Yeah,
word.
it invites you, right? Um, why is courage so important here? Our agreement of courage.
Well, exactly that. With it being an invitation, it is intuition wants us to expand. It wants us to grow. It wants us to be fulfilled. And
Mhm.
to have those things, it's usually uncomfortable. It usually requires a good amount of courage, not just in intuition, but in ourselves and what we're trying to create or the risks we're trying to do. It is the courage to take action and do something even when our system is yelling at us not to.
Mhm. Right. It asks us to trust, right? And to trust something of the unknown requires courage because we have to step forward with ourselves without the support of past patterns, right? To act from what is present right now, here, instead of what has been reinforced. So, and that's where courage becomes necessary because not because the path is unclear, because if we're following intuition, it starts to become way more clear, but because it asks us beyond to move beyond what feels safe, right? Um, and this is where we can start to see the pattern. But instead of following it now, we get to choose. We can choose what to do. I could choose to just keep going on and on and on, or I could choose to step into something better, right? I can take control. And by doing this, we allow the past to release its grip on us. And we start to respond to what is real in front of us now. That's what courage is here. Not forcing action, but trusting the alignment, the connection. Even when it asks you to step into something unknown, like you said.
You brought up something earlier, and I think it's really important. And it's how much fear truly does live in our memories, in our survival patterns. How it is trying so hard to call us back to what once was, while intuition tries to bring us into the moment. It tries to tell us we are not our past. We are capable in this moment to achieve something more than we have before.
There's another bonus axiom that just came to mind as we were going through this conversation that really is the perfect axiom probably for the whole show, right? And that axiom is the responsibility of the greater self to remind the lesser self of the true nature of things. Reflect and meditate regularly on this. That pretty much sums up this whole intuition versus fear thing because
Yeah.
our lower selves, right, are very fear based. Our higher selves are what?
Are connected to everything and the infinite possibilities around us.
Right. Yes. Because intuition is our connection to the universal mind, that universal intelligence, God, the force, whatever you want to call it. And it's not generated by or through or because of the limited self, like our fear-based self, right? It's not shaped by this past conditioning. It comes from a deeper field of awareness that is not bound by anything, right? It's completely limitless. And when you're connected in that way, guidance does not come through reaction. It never does. It comes through presence over perfection, right? It's not forced, it's received. It's received through our connection. So, uh, because ultimately, Michael, intuition is not trying to protect you, but it's also not trying to control you either. It guides you, right?
And the more you trust it, the more it'll help you expand. I think how much I've started following through with that in these last couple years and how different my life has become the more I've been willing to do things that I wouldn't normally do. Learning how to handle situations in a manner that I normally wouldn't. Learning to have boundaries. all these things were not easy. They weren't something that was in they were not they were not what I knew as how to live life. And even now I'm working on these things, but the more I do, the more I expand, and the more the universe meets me halfway.
Yeah, well said. There is a deep, that is the deeper reason intuition expands, because it aligns us with life. It aligns us with everything, right? It moves us into growth, into change, into becoming. It draws us into presence. And of course, as we discussed, fear moves us in the opposite direction. But when we start to understand this truth, we start to see that life is not static. It is movement, but it's also, with that movement comes the consequence of change, right? It's continuously becoming, like this path that we walk, that we teach. It's continually becoming more, expanding. It's because it's not bound by, none of this is bound by the need to hold on to what is passing or fleeting. It's connected to something deeper, again, something infinite, right? Something that continues on beyond any single moment or any single one outcome or any one single form, even moves beyond us, right? And because of that, it leads us forward, even when the path is unfamiliar. And you said it perfectly. Intuition expands because it allows. Fear contracts because it clings, right? Again, fear tries to preserve what is known. Intuition moves with what is becoming, even if we don't understand it. It's where we have to have trust. And this is why the agreement of faith plays such an important role here, right?
You know, I think back to one of the lessons we had that hit me the hardest. And I don't remember how the conversation came about, but it was, what is the difference between faith and, I'm trying to think what the other term was. What's the lesser form of faith? It must have faith because faith knows things will be better. This says, I hope they're better.
Hope.
We had a lesson on how the difference between hope and faith. Those who hope pray things will get better. Those who have faith have the resilience and fortitude to know things will be better, that everything is working out. Yeah. And that was so profound to me because I realized so much of my life was built in hope. But to live a life of meaning, to live a life where I know I can expand, I must have faith that I will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we just did a show on faith. The very last show, the show before this one, we did on faith. And we discovered that faith is a discipline. And faith is what allows us to move with this expansion. It's because it's not certainty about the outcome, but trust in the direction, right? Because intuition leads us forward. And quite often, it doesn't provide most answers that we're trying to really understand sometimes, right? Yeah. It opens a path, but it asks you to step into it without needing to see the entire way. That's how I taught you on this path, right? I opened the path for you, and I gave you road markers, and I gave you a map to stop and you know, take in the sights as you went along, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't answer all of the many of the questions you had, because most of those questions were you trying to seek control, right? You're trying to seek control over the path. And that's what fear does. Fear wants guarantees. It wants control. It wants to remain in charge over you and over everything else. That's not how any path works. Faith moves us differently, though. It allows us to step forward without being able to see the larger picture sometimes. It allows us to trust what is opening for us. Not blindly, mind you, but with the understanding that growth does not come from staying where you are, right? That's why it's a discipline. You recognize that things are expanding in front of you and around you, and instead of retreating or surrendering away from it, you lean into it. You trust that what is unfolding is not meant to diminish you or fragment you, but to move you into something greater. And a lot of times that is into yourself, moving you into yourself, right? That's what faith is. Not forcing a path, but trusting it enough to walk it.
God, that is so beautiful. And you're right. You're absolutely right. That is the key within all of this. Fear does seek control. It seeks to know all things, to know, is my effort going to be worth it?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to be rejected, or will this pan out? Fear is constantly trying to protect you from uncertainty. And when you let intuition have its voice, when you follow it, it is the field of pure potentiality. There is infinite possibilities that can stem from what intuition is telling you to do. And that is horrifying to the nervous system. That is horrifying to your ego, because it seeks to have its hands on everything, to control every little aspect.
It seeks to be God. It seeks to be the creator instead of participating in creation. That's why it fights so hard. And again, I'm gonna start reminding you guys this every day if I can remember. But try to sit in silence for 5 or 10 minutes a day. No input, no. You know what? And do it without music. Do it without any candles or any of that stuff. For this kind of practice, just sit with yourself in silence, right? So that you can start to hear what is underneath all the other things. Michael, do you have any closing thoughts for the show today?
Yeah. Again, we're not talking. This episode's not about mastering fear. It is not about devoiding yourself of fear. As we said earlier, we both have fear. But it is about learning to separate yourself from it, to create that little distance, to take that pause whenever fear raises its ugly head, to learn to sit with it, to allow it to come up. That way you can find what's underneath, which is intuition. To learn to be brave and to have courage as you take steps that normally fear would tell you is not a good idea.
Right.
This episode is about helping you cultivate an inner knowing so you can start differentiating the difference between insecurity and intuition. So trust yourself, work with yourself. This is not something that's going to change overnight, but practicing is what allows you to start creating just enough space for those moments for you to start letting your fear be something outside of you instead of something that runs the show.
Yeah. Yeah. I will add to that. That this show is about creating disciplines, not habits, disciplines, conscious effort, right? Because habits are easy to make, but disciplines, that takes a little bit of work. But in the long run, disciplines are much more powerful than habits. They're habits. Think of disciplines as habits with conscious effort put into them, right? So our exercise for today, I'm going to do it in two things. One's going to be a reflective exercise, and one's going to be something you can use in the moment, any moment, in real time, whatever's happening. And this exercise is going to help us learn to calibrate. Is it intuition, or is it fear or insecurities? So step one for the reflective aspect of this exercise. Step one is you're going to recall. You're going to think of a recent decision that you made. And on a piece of paper, or in your journal, you journalers, you need to write down what you felt. Just don't judge it. Just whatever feeling comes to mind or to body, right? Write it down. Now, I want you to spend some time with that, with whatever you wrote down. And I want you to decide, in other words, I want you to choose, consciously choose. Not judge, but just choose. Use the truth to discern this. Was it urgent or was it calm, the feeling? Did it create clarity or did it create confusion? Now, once you spent 3 or 5 minutes with that, really, please take some time with it. Reconnect. Reconnect here, right? Back to our system. Close your eyes and breathe slowly and bring your awareness inward. And I want you to sit with that for at least 3 to 5 minutes. Sit with whatever it was, but make sure you're feeling it in your whole being. When you end this exercise, you can affirm something like, I release fear. I trust my higher guidance. That could be an affirmation that you can use to end the exercise. Now, to use that exercise in real time, in the moment, the next time you're facing a decision, pause and ask yourself, am I feeling calm or am I feeling urgent? Am I feeling clear or am I confused now? is this feeling contracting me, squeezing me, or is it expanding? And then in real time, you can kind of discern the difference between intuition and fear, intuition and insecurity. So any thoughts on the exercise for today?
Practice, practice, practice.
Practice it. And spend like 5 or 7 minutes with it, at least, right? You're doing this work for yourself. It doesn't hurt me or help me that you do this stuff. It's only going to help you, right? So make sure you're spending some good time with this stuff. Our affirmations for today. I trust my inner knowing. I recognize the difference between fear and truth. I choose clarity over confusion. I listen beyond noise. I am guided by higher intelligence. Or you could add, I am guided by the light. I am guided by the force. I am guided by God. Whatever fits your puzzle there. Okay. And our journal prompts for today. When have I ignored my intuition in the past? And if you're anything like me, there's going to be a bunch of them. How did fear influence my decisions? What does intuition feel like in my body? Hint, hint, if you do the exercise a few times, you might feel that. You might be able to answer that question. What situations create confusion versus clarity for me? And how can I create more space for stillness? That's always a good question that we have to ask ourselves. So, listen, the difference between intuition and fear and insecurities is not something that you figure out one and done all at once. Wham, bam, I'm all done with it, right? It's something you learn to recognize through awareness by practicing the discipline of awareness. Intuition has always been there. It's not something that you have to create. In fact, you can't create intuition. It's something you connect to and you start to experience when the noise settles, right? But it does not compete. It does not force itself forward. It'll just, in our old shows, Michael, we used to do this. It just kind of taps and taps and taps. And sometimes it'll flick your ears or whatever, right? But whisper in your ear. But it waits for you patiently, faithfully waits for you to become still enough to recognize it. So as you move forward from this episode today, start to pay attention. Notice what feels calm versus what feels urgent. Notice what feels clear and what feels conflicted or confusing. Notice what expands your vessel and what contracts it. And when you start to see those things clearly, do not rush. Pause. Become still for a few minutes a day, even if that's how you start. And allow clarity to return before you act, right? A lot of this stuff is a remembrance, Michael, right? We talk about remembering things. I'm not teaching you anything. I'm trying to help you remember things because it's all in there. It's inside of you, right? All we got to do is just reach out and take it. So if this episode resonated with you, please take a moment to like, subscribe if you're not a subscriber, and so that you can follow this podcast and you don't miss all the stuff that comes next. And if you know someone who is struggling to trust themselves, struggling to find intuition, struggling to see the difference between where they're in charge of themselves or where they're being led, share this with them. I promise you it's going to help at least one person that you know. So listen, guys, keep doing the work. Keep refining your awareness. You guys are our spiritual warriors out there. And most importantly, keep learning to trust what is true within you. Make sure you check out our TikToks, our Facebooks, our Instagrams, YouTubes, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere, right? The greatest website, Michael, that was ever built. What's it called?
www.newastral.com.
Yeah. We love you guys very much. Thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, with love and gratitude, ad lucem.
Ad lucem.